What does the future of the defense industrial base look like? In the next 10, 15, 20 years? What role does industry play in shaping that change? How receptive does the Department of Defense need to be in order to enact that change?
My name's Adam Vasquez. Some people call me an economist. Some people call me a marketer. Some people call me a CEO, a disruptor, whatever you want to call me. There's been good words and bad words that have used my name, but mostly good, hopefully. Let's see. I run a company called Merit. We're a market invention company. We have several companies, everything from market platforms spanning crypto, Bitcoin, other things to marketing consultancy, innovation consultancy. And really what we do is we invent markets and across all industries. We do a lot in the defense industry, a lot in just government services, but we do a ton in all these other avenues, everything from $30,000 luxury wallets, such companies with Bugatti, which is a great company, to doing automobiles and anything in between. So we see it all.
Super broad. And you mentioned a keyword in there that I'd love to get a definition for. What's market invention, and
Yeah,
how do you define
so
that?
market invention, it's so a couple people, depending on who you are and when you hear it, you're like, okay, that sounds a little kitschy, or gimmicky, or what is that? And I would just say it, simply put, is finding and creating a market based on shared belief systems. And that's really about creating a community, a group, a collaborative, a collective that exchanges value, whether it could be products, services, money, transactions, whatnot. But it's a community. And it's really, I would argue, it's been around forever. However, it's been used improperly in the past, and for good and bad reasons. But, and it's something I learned throughout my career. I think it's also the new economy and where that's going.
So can you give me an example of what market invention means
Yeah.
to you, and how you
I
create
think
that?
it's simply put, the old adage of adding value to a community. As marketers tend to be more promoters this day and age, less of real marketing strategy, innovation, and it's a shame because at somewhere along the lines we became more tacticians, communications people. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just mean that we lost our strategic seat at the table. So really what market is, and if you think about it in a perspective of, who believes in what you believe, so belief systems in themselves, right? So a lot of times companies will sell products to people, right? They'll promote products, they'll promote services, but they're not really connecting with a community and trying to really add value and create a broader ecosystem where they're not trying to just sell, they're actually trying to grow a market, trying to build an industry. And it gets confused, right? Because people say, oh, that's like a category, industry category. Well, no, because an industry has multiple markets within it. And, you could use, the defense industry is a good example, but also automotive example or what have you. Buyers, why do some people buy from one company versus another company? Many people will say, oh, it's based on relationships. It's all about relationships. It's all about the person. Yes. But let's take it a little bit deeper. Let's go deeper and deeper and deeper to that. Let's look at the root cause. Why do we get along? Because we have some shared values and way we look at things. And and those values are not really tangible, but they are what makes the basis of why we would want to exchange value and share things like that. So like if you look at a consumer from consumer space, Patagonia really owns a sort of environmental aspect, right? So people that buy from Patagonia are not going to buy from necessarily North Face in maybe Columbia or these other apparel brands. Right now they might, but Patagonia symbolizes a belief system that they believe in. Now, the same people might also believe in buying a Subaru versus, say, Ford, right? Now, if you're a bit more of an adventurer, you might want to buy Jeep. Or if you're in an Americana type of market, like that's what you believe, you might buy Jeep or like the Ford, something Ford related, or Chevy or what have you. These brands have developed their own markets over time, these established markets, but really the idea of mass markets, mass utility really never existed. Because what happens when there's an alternative to a company that's kind of like a utility, like generic, right? Just services a lot of different customers. What happens is, a cheaper, better version comes along, and then you lose your customers, right? But if you can tap in and actually be, a co-creator of trying to solve something purpose-based, solve something together, then it changes the conversation, and then the switching doesn't really happen because you're not really buying on price. Now, there's people that buy on price alone, buy on quality possibly, but you got to ask yourself the question, is if those are just table stakes or those are differentiators? And I think a market really is about, finding yourself and finding your personality and people that believe in what you see and what you see, how you see the future of your industry or the world. And really, it's a collective of people coming together to solve those shared pains, and with a point of view or a lens through that, right? So I think that's the long-winded way, and there's tons of other ways to get there. But I think the key point is everybody is selling products and services and promoting a brand, where market leaders don't promote themselves. They promote the idea of a market, a change, an idea, a vision of the future. And that's what gets people excited and shifts from the legacy market to your market, or just you might be the first one to ever organize a fragmented belief system, which a lot of people do, and that's where leaders do, whether they realize it or not, that's what they're doing.
So how, if I'm a company, if I'm just selling products, how do I go from that product brand, sort of idea to this selling ideas, to this selling beliefs, to this developing belief system based, operation?
Well, it's really hard for marketers to do that by themselves, right? Because it really is in many ways the CEO's role, right? Because the CEO is a personification of that values and those beliefs, okay? And we talk about culture, top-down culture creates culture. Well, the culture of your company is the same of your market, right? And you can see it in Silicon Valley, where everybody is honestly similar as far as established from like Atari, Intel, and everything else. They created the culture standards, and then everybody kind of iterated from there. Well, your culture creates market, and that's really what it is. So your customers are buying into your culture, they're buying into your purpose, you're buying into that. So really, if you're a CMO or a marketer and you're in a place where your CEO really doesn't have a clue or really doesn't look at this, and you want to try to invent markets or be a leader, unfortunately, you just got to get out of there because you have no chance. But if it is systematically from a belief system, then you can start there. And I think that's the point on maybe CMOs or marketing directors that have a marketing function, or anybody in a leadership team perspective should be asking the question is, what's my point of view on the legacy industry or the pain itself? What are my values? And I'm not talking about just table stakes like integrity, accountability, and honestly, like Enron had integrity and accountability, right? So did WorldCom, right? And they clearly did not. So there's just no room for words any longer, right? So you actually have to live it and show it and everything else. So you got to get honest with yourself about it's almost like you got to know yourself and know what you're trying to do truly beyond a product or service, because those products and service, that's not the root cause. That's just how you're trying to solve the pain that you think exists in the world. And that's your voice. And that way of solving it is the thing that you should focus on. I mean, if you don't have that already, but the problem is most people will follow the money. And I'm not saying don't follow the money. Where the budget is, it matters, right? But what I am saying is that people are just sounding and looking exactly the same as everybody else because they are literally copying each other. So they don't have any point of view, and they can never be the market leader. And a lot of people are too afraid to step out of the industry norm and go with their own core belief systems. But that's when the magic happens, is when that separation happens, when you have that you take that risk and chance, and then everything changes from there. It's a little vague, but I think you just think about have a little bit of a soul searching and ask yourself questions about what is the industry pain that I'm really trying to solve? Why is my point of view different? What is different about it? And am I really doing that on a day-to-day basis? It kind of seems simple,
You mean
but like sometimes it is just that simple.
well, I mean, I'm just wondering, is the one question to ask not how can I make money?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks are sort of in that we've been making money or we do make money and we are sort of making less, but we're trying to figure out why.
Yeah.
And they're in that weird we don't know what's going on phase, and it's like that soul searching is
Yeah,
hard to
and
push.
Chelsea, it's a whole other thing, right? They're not even making money; they're making fiat currency. That's a whole other issue, and that currency is debasing at an nominal rate, and it just was 7% inflation, and that's CPI, which doesn't even measure inflation the right way. So, and that's going to be at least going on for the next 4 years. So, if you have any dollars or any currency denominated in your bank, think about it. Your wealth is you're losing 7 to 25%. That's a whole side note conversation we can have.
Invest in gold,
Well, gold. The problem with
crypto.
gold is what do you do with it? It sits in a basement in a locked door. I'm a big Bitcoin believer, and I mean all the crypto, but Bitcoin. Very bullish on Bitcoin, and that is going to that's the silent revolution right now. I mean that's the peaceful revolution that's happening, and it's going to happen because it will take away nations' abilities to wage war on themselves because they can't debase ourselves any further. So or even do wasteful government spending or any of that because it actually takes that away that control away from the government, and then that's why many governments are afraid. But I look at it as the truth to financial freedom, and gets us closer to a true democracy when we have that true freedom and that truth to what we're talking about, right? So that's a whole other discussion. Obviously, we can have another time, but so
Well, I mean, one discussion I have had earlier is in just on the subject of democratizing technology, in conversation within the defense space. And I think, market invention and just being able to even freely talk about things that might be new markets in a way that might sort of hint at some
yeah,
longer term, maybe lower value investments that are going on that could be diverted or, put elsewhere to new technologies. I think that's a hard conversation to have. There's probably
there's
some
a
bias
lot,
going
and
on there.
right, and the institution, the legacy institution, has the most to lose, right? And but the thing is, you can't stop the trend. Trend's your friend, and that's all I do is sit and we market inventions about following megatrends, and megatrends is not that we are going to do just a megatrend. It's just you leverage a megatrend based on timing. And right now, with everything that's happening, you could argue currency wars are occurring, and the U.S. dollar is still the most secure currency out there, and because of something like at least 60% of the world's debt's denominated in the U.S. dollar. But that's all changing, and I talked about it, in the last call we had was just what happened when you talk about innovation and defense or just innovation in general. I think the heart of what market invention is innovation, but it's just innovation is just such an overused term, and most people that say they do innovation are doing anything remotely close to it, right? So really about innovation, and people can debate me on this all day, and that's fine, but one of my point of views on what innovation is looking at this
And he's welcoming that, just so everyone knows.
is looking at the same pain in a different lens. So if you think about our defense spending, we're still looking at it from a 20th century, or actually not even a 20th century, a 16th century lens, if you really think about it. And just the amount of investments that we put in kinetic, even cyber, but it's all reactive. It's all reactive. And what the new modern, call it battlefield or what have you, is not going to be in kinetic. And I hope it never is kinetic because that's catastrophic. We've all seen that, and I hope we break the cycle finally. But we're not going to break the cycle until we change how we look at it. And what I mean by that is, defense, like what does defense really mean? Defense, the whole goal for our Department of Defense, honestly, is right to prevent wars and prevent something and prevent our best sovereign interest, right? Well, our sovereign interest is to raise the consciousness of everybody in the world so we don't have to worry about this stuff anymore, right? And if you think about our mode and the way we think, everything, there's a consciousness scale, and there's so much happening now in quantum physics and epigenetics and all of this. So there's tons of science out there. There's even Cal Berkeley scientists and academics are finding out that this is a whole other discussion that really what we see here is a simulation in many ways. So, and I'm not talking necessarily matrix and other things, but it's really fascinating, right? So, well, metaverse is still a human-made thing. I'm talking about some broader universal laws, right? So when we start thinking about frequencies and effectiveness, when you play at that, the lowest level of frequency is shame, right? That's when it's destruction, shame, and greed, all of that up. You don't get to a creation area, it's all destruction. You know, cancer comes from this, from an epigenetics level they're discovering now. And it's really about your thoughts and what you think about on a daily basis causes your reality, right? So this is all just a social conscious construct. We're all agreeing this is what reality is. So, and I didn't mean to go this deep, but I think this is the heart of the challenge. You know, we only win when we raise the consciousness of the world so that war and this other stuff and the fear, greed, you know, shame, all of that scarcity thinking is eliminated. And so if we think about innovation and solving the problem in a new way, it's about enabling people to get out of that low frequency vibration to elevate. And in the US is the highest is from measuring. There's a really great book, Power versus Force, that gets into frequencies and measurements. And there's a bunch of scientific models out there that is all bringing this to light. So I'm not just talking about crystals and astronomical stuff and crazy stuff. I'm a very pragmatic person. But I also know that from personal experience what works and what doesn't. And when you invent markets, that's kind of a bold statement, right? But you need to bring people together and create it, and you realize that collective is a faster way than forcing people, so to speak. So bringing people together, and I think that the defense industry and all of us, and you know that I have a large background in defense consulting, IT consulting, selling, marketing, and also helping with integration of some of the world's leading defense technology. I can tell you that it's all reactive. None of it is solving the root cause. And I think it would be a very interesting shift for us to say, Department of Defense, stop focusing on the physical the reactive physical sides of defense. And I'm not saying don't be, I do believe in showing strength and other deterrence. And I'm not saying that I'm also not passive or anything like that. And I believe, some of me believes that you punch a bully in the face, right? But what I am saying is none of it's worked. It really hasn't worked, right? So what do we do? We need to look at the problem differently. We just need to look at the problem through a different way. What does defense really mean? Well, we got to solve the root cause issue. And what are those root cause issues? And they're not kinetic issues. They are not cyber security issues. They are not, drone issues. They're not hypersonic issues. These are not the issues. These are just.
Well, let's talk big shifts in big group mentality. So, in an embedded, in a legacy, in a process-driven entity that has built up so much bureaucracy, how do you break that cycle? And I think one, at least what I would like to think is a sort of shining example of at least trying is, DIU and the National Security Innovation Network. that trying to grow some innovation within the federal space, although be it it's on their own terms nonetheless, which might be a baseline problem there. But how do you take such an embedded group that they want to think that they've built up all of this stuff for a reason, to shift from that process driven mindset to that?
Well, I mean, I think so I'll just say it a couple ways. So I'd like to unpack like process. So I'm not saying that process isn't important. Being able to repeat it again and again and getting the same results, I think that's critically important, right? So there's bad bureaucracy, and then I don't like bureaucracy at all, but there's also good process, right? So coming from a company like Robbins Joya, which arguably invented modern project management, what we see today. So I'm a big believer in process. However, like you said, process can be rigid, and it can be one-dimensional and doesn't allow necessarily new ideas and innovation. And I think the idea point on the process where it's failed us is we need to look at it more of a software agile methodology, but we also need to get answers beyond, just throwing more metal or defense, or, more just stuff at the problem. We actually need to take a second and rethink fundamentally what it means to defend freedom, so to speak, and abundance, and what everything, our promise, our market. Here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. Our founding fathers were really incredible market inventors. I would argue that the United States is the most successful market invention of all time. Some people might say Christianity, but I won't go there. So when we think about the U.S., like no other country has people dying every year to get here. People are dying to leave other countries. We can't forget that. And we got our problems, right? But we have a lot of problems, and the stress fractures are being shown right now, which is a whole other issue. And I think we're at the end of an 80-year cycle. That's why we got to rethink all of this stuff. We have to rethink all of this stuff, and that takes leadership from people to saying that you're right, this isn't working. Every time we close a hot zone, another hot zone pops up. We can't occupy countries anymore because that absolutely has never worked. You could argue it took down one of the greatest nations ever, the Great Britain, right, in the colonization. It also made them one of the greatest ever. So and it hasn't worked for us for multiple ways, and so we just need to rethink all of that, and I think it really comes from the leadership, and I think it comes from courage too. So I think it starts with asking the question, and it was something I wrote on LinkedIn today. Is, are we making our decisions so there's negative and positive innovation, right? Innovation or the outcomes of innovation can be good for humanity or absolutely a terror, right? And it's two sides of the same coin, right? So many times, especially in a defense space, which is trying to protect people, we're trying to keep the bad guys away, people trying to do negative stuff, that is all real, and that is unfortunately going to be here for a little while until, again, raised consciousness and people just don't think like that anymore. And that's going to hopefully not take as long as as it could, but we're on our path. But I think the question to ask ourselves, is this decision a scarcity-based decision, or is this decision an abundance-based decision? And I don't know, Chelsea, personally from you, but me personally, and in the businesses and the markets that we invent, and we're talking about billions of dollars in assets and value here. Every time I made a scarcity-based decision, it has hurt me. Whether or not immediate or long-term, it has always either limited my opportunities or really even physically harmed me, right? So how many decisions are we making based on scarcity is my question. Knowing that there's certain realities to the world.
we can even define
Yeah,
scarcity a little further and think, scarcity in terms of you've got a lot of pressure on you to make this decision, like
sure.
lack of time. You've got a commitment, like a lack of, or an excess amount of pressure from, people in your life who are trying to make this, i.e.
Right.
Congress or large groups that are inflicting their beliefs, their pressures onto these thought processes, and that makes even making a big decision not only difficult but that much
Yeah.
more risky. It's when I think it's been known and shown that lack of cognitive resources means you've got a lack of decision making skills
It,
and
it,
capability right there.
you're totally right. And so I use hypersonic missiles as an example, right? A bunch of articles. Oh, the CCP is past us. We're screwed. Or AI. Like we got just gonna quit. This is not gonna work. I mean, here's the reality. A market leader doesn't follow other industry players, right? So if we are focused on hypersonic right now, we're not being a market leader, we're being a market follower. It's already passed. And here's the other part is, God forbid a kinetic war starts. I would think most historians will say this, that most of our military technology was obsolete going into every war. So the minute the first, bullet or missile is flown, we're going to realize that all this money we spent is totally irrelevant because it's a new war, it's a new thing, it's a new strategy and everything. And that's happened in every American war, right?
It's amazing that you bring that up. I was just listening to a recap of a conference, a Navy conference, in which they came out of postgraduate school saying, 3.5 million for a hypersonic is really cheap, and in reality, that's like not really cheap in terms of like what we have right now that's disposable that could do the same job that we could throw 15 at. That's
Right.
half the price still, and it's the
Well, I
argument's
mean, and
not there, right?
here's the type of innovation thinking I think we really need to ask ourselves if we want to maintain a leadership position in this new world order, because we're talking about a new world order that's happening. It is. The U.S. dollar as a currency reserve is pretty much lost its currency reserve status. It's just nobody's saying it. The central banks are protecting it. People are trying to hide it from the general population, not to create chaos and people doing a bank run, and I'm not trying to do that either. But what if we look at it differently? What if we say, how we win is not building more military? How about we get everybody on Bitcoin? I'm not saying that's the answer, and I'm a Bitcoin bug, and for a lot of reasons, and freedom and everything else. But go ahead.
Are you being paid? Are you
Yeah, well,
endorsed?
Bitcoin, it's like
Just need to know that
yeah,
for
yeah.
the show.
Well, everybody
Okay.
wins in Bitcoin when everybody wins, right? But the thing for me is my realization on any of those sort of freeing, like personal freeing assets, or anything that creates personal freedom, which is the American dream anyways. So why would we be afraid of it? In fact, that's a natural progression of our society. If you think about it, if we want to be truth to what the American dream really is, it's freedom in the pursuit of happiness. And somehow we've lost that somehow. And I don't think we have. It's there. It's in every, that's it's like a universal law, right? And so what if we actually let countries figure out how they're going to do it, but we just enable them? And I'm not talking about, putting in our own, like we've done in the intelligence community for the past 60 years, which none of it's worked, installing banana republics, all this stuff. It doesn't work. So why don't we actually look outside and accelerate some of these freedom producing technologies that are not military? And what if we looked at the defense industry from that light? I mean, I think that would be a fascinating exploration, at the very least, to get some new ideas out there, and new innovations.
Well, I mean, I would love to just touch on that and get your definition then of what commercialization is from. I'm sure you know the
Yep.
word just as well as I do in the terms of defense. It's the ultimate goal of the SBIRs. It's the You want to get your prototype there, you want to
Yeah.
get whatever you're doing in terms of defense technology. Commercialization is where it's at. So how do you define that in terms of, the commercial world interacting
Well,
with
first I
defense?
will say this. There's a lot of people that say the government can't innovate. Don't ask them to do it, and a lot of the time I'm there too. But we can't forget what DARPA gave us. DARPA gave us the internet, basically. I mean, the DARPA net was the first internet, and then it was the first, Unix, the Unix network, which created one of the largest companies in the world, like say UUNet, and then other issues, with WorldCom buying them and all of that. But regardless, you think about internet. Internet is one of the biggest transformational assets ever. I mean, it allows us to get to the metaverse, allows us cybersecurity. I mean, it's changed, it's life changing, right? So what I'm saying is there is that partnership, but I think the challenge is the defense industry, or just civilian agencies as well, have tried to become the what's the word I would say? They're not opening it up for innovation. They're trying to dictate what they think they need, whether through their RFPs and how they're written. And then you've created this entire consulting world that is literally staffing companies. All it is security clearances. It's all it is. It's a contract vehicles. I can get access to security clearances because they're valuable, because of the scarcity and everything else. And that's crazy, right? Because what's happening is we're really, so I'll use this as an example. So what are we up to now from total government spend to US GDP? I think we're at 60 to 70% now. Some people will fact check me on this, but there's a bunch of articles out there, and if you're going to fact check me on this, in the audience, please feel I'm more than open to be corrected. Okay. Yeah,
I'll give his contact
please.
information at the
I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to raise points to get people awareness, and that's the innovator in me. So we think about the Great Depression when that was measured. So when that was measured, they looked at unemployment rates. Well, guess what they did? They included in their unemployment rates government employees, because government is not productive to the economy. It's not a producer. It's a consumer. So, and why do we not include it now? Because our unemployment rate would be 70% right now, just about. Maybe not that high, but it's more than the Great Depression if you look at the government as consumers and not producers. And that's a reality. And the reason why I say it's consumers, because it's a tax on your own personal wealth. And again, I'm not for big government. I'm also not for small government. I'm for right-sized government, whatever that looks like. Okay, so I am pro-government. Okay, I mean, I think we have the greatest government in the world. We have the greatest military. We have some of the greatest leaders in the world. But I'm just trying to challenge everybody that we think about this differently. But the reality is if we're at 70% GDP is government spending, then isn't that a fake GDP? Isn't and if we are printing currency to pay to fund this, then we're just debasing things. So we're not really getting to where we need to be as a group, as a collective, and that's where frankly, we all just need to wake up. And it's not pointing fingers, and it's not pointing fingers at politicians. It's not pointing fingers at agencies. It's not pointing fingers other than pointing at ourselves. Because all the challenges we see right now are the challenges we've created for ourselves. We've elected these officials. We've let this all go on. And I'm not saying like revolution in the streets. No. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do any of that. We have a democratic society. We can work. Yeah, we have a high level conscious society, the most conscious society in the world. We need to just kind of work through this stuff and be able to come to the middle again. And so I think that's just the politicization of everything, but that's the divide and conquer mentality, which we need to get away with, but we're letting it happen. So I think that it's time for looking at the same pain problems and looking at it in a totally new way and looking at it from an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset, knowing that there are real threats out there. There is real, the CCP is real, and they're digressing to a very closed state, and it's scary for the free Western world. There are real troop buildups on the Ukraine border. That is all real. So I'm not by means saying that we take our ability to defend ourselves at all. But what I am saying is we're going to keep doing this again and again and again and again. And that's insanity, right? We're going to keep doing this. So we need to rethink that. And that's true innovation. That is true innovation. The minute our leaders suddenly decide, imagine one of our generals saying, I'm not so sure troop buildup is the right play. Maybe we should start thinking about collective consciousness and raising the consciousness of these emerging markets so we don't have to go down there anymore. And I'm not talking about propaganda or instilling people dictators or anything else, but just making people aware of the truth. Education as simply as possible, and enablement. And again, not country building, not any of that. And I don't want to be said to do that. But I just think that there's a real opportunity. You look at countries like El Salvador, who's adopted Bitcoin. That's innovation. They are going to be one of the wealthiest countries in the world in the future. There is a new world order, and it's just different. So again, I talked more about Bitcoin, but it is exciting. But there's a lot of other exciting pieces that are happening. So we just need to be able to apply and figure out how to take all these new techs and use them in a ride. But it doesn't matter. These technologies don't matter. It's talking about the root cause. How are we going to solve the root cause? In all of these things, it's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem. We're only fixing the symptoms. And we're going to keep doing this. And it's crazy. It's mind-numbing. So I guess, someone myself that loves the defense industry, and I'm grateful for everybody that served and everything they've done. I'm totally grateful. Family members, friends that have lost their lives in these conflicts. So I am totally grateful for everything. So, but and I'm, the anti-war, pro-peace, and all that love, 60s stuff, that's all good. But I'm just trying to say, from a pragmatist innovator perspective, what are we doing? So we're just keep throwing the same ideas at the same problem, just new versions, new upgraded versions of new things that collect intelligence, shoot, and other things. And it's still, again, it's a Band-Aid on the problem. It's suppressing a problem that will just come up and flare up in our face, and it hurts us in the long run because it's a scarcity mindset. So how do we change that, Chelsea? How do we make us so we don't think scarce and we think abundant as a society? And we're the best at it. If you read Power versus Force,
we have the power. We have the power, we can print more
No,
money,
that's true.
right?
That's a nice thing.
Much,
the thing is, when you have your debt is denominated in your own currency, that's modern monetary theory. You can go to the moon with that. But I think we're seeing it in inflation right now. CPI is at 7%, but it's higher than that, and it's going to be here for probably the next 4 years. Several economists have said this, and everything I've looked at and studied has said the same thing. And we're talking about, and probably the real inflation, you're talking about meat being 40% increase. You're talking about oil prices, gas prices over plus 25%. CPI, a lot of people don't know this, but CPI really doesn't measure things like that. They measure alternatives. So if say steak grows up and nobody can afford it, but there's chicken that's an alternative and people buy the chicken, you don't have to worry about the meat prices inflation in the CPI. So things like...
So, it forces change, does it not? If you can no longer, as some Western state, drive around in your big truck with your, excessive gas, diesel prices that, you're blowing the black smoke out of, does that force the community as a whole to shift?
Well, and I will say this, Chelsea, I will say this about shifting the whole community consensus. I think, here's my point of view on contrast, right? Because we're talking about we're talking about contrast in itself, and contrast to me is balance, right? So when we think about as contrast is balance, then if you want to drive your truck, now I'm not saying we got to think about the broader, we're all here on the planet Earth and we need to protect ourselves. So don't be ignorant and care for others. Don't just be self-serving. Service to others matters. But what I am saying is if you have a specific point of view, we've got 50 states. You can pick which market you want to be in based on your belief system and go down to Florida if that's what you love, or go down to Texas, or go to Washington if that's what you want, or go to Massachusetts or New York or Virginia where I am. What doesn't matter. That's the cool thing. That's what makes the United States probably the most powerful nation in the world. Our group of people is our contrast. No other, I've lived all over the world, traveled all over the world. I have friends all over the world. And the American experience is still the most unique experience because Europe does not have this. They do not have the diversity that we have. No country has the diversity. And why? Because we've accepted diversity from everywhere. And that's the thing that really, it's like if the United States was a company, right? And I was saying, okay, we were the market leader, but how do we stay the market leader? And in market invention terms, you got to pivot, you got to evolve and define what the next shift is for the industry and stay ahead of it. Well, we talk about strengths in market invention. What are your strengths? I don't like SWOT analysis. I think it's a legacy. It doesn't work. It's like it needs to die. And anybody who promotes a SWOT analysis tool really doesn't know modern marketing, okay? And I saw there's a few recent articles that one posted about, certain government marketing and other things, and they're just wrong, okay? So what I will say this, though, is if you think about that, our strengths as a country, immigration is probably number one. Why aren't we embracing immigration and putting up a big welcome sign saying we will take all of the world's intellectual capital. Please come. All your intellect, all your strengths, all of it, we will absorb it and we will monopolize that.
Do you really think, though, that we accept more immigration of thought,
more than most countries, more than all countries, I would say.
Of belief.
Yeah, I would say this, and my European friends will argue with me, but I will say this: in certain countries, you're forced to pick a job before you even know what it is, based on IQ tests or other things. Here, it's like, go. I mean, in our organization, merit, we talk about inclusion, but I talk about even more inclusion and diversity, but even more is cognitive diversity. I have very right-winged Republicans. I have very left-wing Democrats partnering together to solve this because they get it. It's the fun. That's the fun. It would be really boring if we had thought all the same things and all the time and looked the same and had the same beliefs, same restaurants to eat. I mean, that's most countries in the world. That's most countries in the world. They have the same religion, the same race, the same, you know what I mean? Like that is most of Europe. And again, I'm not trying to throw stones here. It's a wonderful place. I love living there. I have friends there. It's a great place. And there's a lot of things we could learn from the EU, right? But it is, nobody has the diversity as the United States does. And that's because our model is inclusion. If that's really what we were, because everybody most people escaped because their ideas were persecuted to come to the United States, where they couldn't get opportunity. If you look at early settlers to the United States, the Quakers, it's all religious persecution. Everybody came here because this is where they could actually be accepted. So if we can't remember that, then we have lost the American dream. That is our strength. This contrast is our strength. This is something we should be embracing.
How do you get a unified group? And I'll make this pretty much our last question here. But how do you get a unified group like the Defense Department? A group that literally thrives on uniformity and coming together as one. How do you get them to embrace change and to embrace that thought that, being striking out on a different
I
path
wish I
might
could
be.
answer it in one
Uh,
statement, Chelsea. That's a big question.
it,
I mean, you need order and chaos, right? I mean, I think there's certain chain of command. There's certain things that when bullets are flying and people are getting hurt and all sorts of bad stuff is happening, you need to have that streamlined, quick chain of command, get it done, trust, reliability, and all of that stuff. So this is what I would say. Why don't we rethink the organizational structure in the hierarchy of our defense, but in a way that says we have to keep these things are relevant, right? We need to be able to move fast. We need to be able to communicate. We can't have people just abandoning their posts in the middle of the night. We need to have that reliability, that consistency, and I have not been in those internal conversations, so I don't know if these are happening in all fairness. But I think in anybody, and it's coming from Robbins Joya, which is all about process improvement and process reengineering, the questions we would ask is like, what are the things we need to accomplish, and then just forget about that stuff. Just forget about it if you can. It doesn't mean it's bad. We're throwing it out. But let's look at it from a new perspective and just build it from scratch and see if this model works, and then we test it. So,
and by stuff, you mean forget about the build
yeah, it's like an org model, right? It's like an org chart, right? So a lot of people will build org charts based on their people, and that's a mistake, or their current customers or what have you, if they're trying to transform, right? And I think what you do is you say, okay, this is the new thing. This is what we're trying to do. And then we build a team or what we think the structure could be to make that the fastest, the most effective, the most efficient. And then we can place people and then we can do that. But we don't look at the old stuff because the old stuff will always toxify the new stuff and where we need to go. And sometimes, I'm not saying always, sometimes you throw out the old model completely. But most of the time, you take what worked, is it still relevant, and then you do a hybrid evolution approach, and that usually is what makes sense because, change is tough. It's really hard to make it like an instant change because, it's the old saying of moving a So when you talk about moving, it's like the old idea is like moving the big battle carrier, right? I mean, that's a big ship in large organizations. Well, I've done this for large enterprises that have hundreds of thousands of employees all over the world, multicultural, which is much more complex than the U.S. military, if you think about it, because you're talking about multi-country, multicultural, multi-language, all of that stuff. And what I've realized is you create a framework, a structure, and then you empower the people to do it. And then you make sure you have the right people that can do it. So there is, and I know it's tough hiring. And the Department of Defense has its struggles in general. I mean, it's tough. But the organizations that are winning now are actually not having a hard time hiring. The best organizations are the ones taking the people because they're looking for new things. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for opportunity. They're looking for, personal freedom and the ability to move, to do things. So if you can solve for that, and the current structure won't allow that. But if you can figure out a way to say, how do I, knowing that we have people from all levels of education, backgrounds, IQs, all of that stuff, the Department of Defense is no different than any other organization in that way, right? But if we could figure out what are the things we need, and knowing these are the societal norms now to be attractive, and personal freedom and respect and giving the opportunity to basically fail or succeed, but that confidence, but you got to have the right people to do that. Not everybody can do that. So then your recruiting may have to change, or what roles, or even your basic training might have to change and evolve. It's like onboarding, employee onboarding. It's similar. You got to change the way you bring people on. So there is a real holistic change. The real challenge is do you do all of it at once? And the answer is no. You got to run things parallel, and you got to do it over time, and you have to over communicate. You have to explain the reason why you want to do, and generations from now want to know the why. They don't want to be ignorant. They want to have purpose, and the legacy is, I only tell you what's useful for you to do right now, and all of this chain of command, and generationally, that's not going to work anymore. But we need to find a way that we can still be effective in a world of chaos, or in a very high chaotic environment that is scary, right? So how do we incorporate those areas and help? And I think we'd be leading, China, because again, leader in this market, not that we should ever go to war with any country, but our adversaries, if you think on a consciousness level, CCP operates at a fear level. They're control. Their whole purpose is to keep the CCP in control. Okay? If they're going after hypersonic missiles and all that other stuff, maybe we should be asking ourselves, what does war look at, or defense, that's a better way, look at a higher level of frequency, because that always beats that frequency regardless. So what does it look like up here? Let's not chase hypersonic. I'm not saying we don't, but I'm just, because I don't have all the intelligence and all of that stuff. I don't have the access to all of this. But what I'm saying is, like, why are we following? Let's get back to leading. But we got to play at a higher consciousness level, because that's what the world needs now. It does not need 17th century, like, I'm going to beat you by force. It doesn't. And again, deterrents matter. But I think there are better proactive ways, and we just need to have these open conversations as an industry that is, again, not technology related. This is a technology conversation and innovation, but innovation is a technology is a byproduct. That's just byproduct. Innovation is thinking and conversation and having contrast and all of this stuff. And we can't be innovative if we don't have contrast. And we can't be innovative if we aren't bringing in new ideas and fresh perspectives from Mexico, from Europe, from Middle East, from Africa, from all over, from Asia, from all over the world.